In this video, we'll look at the features on Nikola Tesla's face that were indicative of his genius and the markers on his face that led to depletion and misfortune in his old age. Enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome back. If you're a first-time viewer to a face reading, please go up here and watch the 5-minute crash course face reading video. Very important if you've never seen a face reading. The terms and terminology are different. There's definitely some Eastern ideas that you'll want to tune into before you watch this. So again, first-time viewer, go up and watch that. But today, we're talking about Nikola Tesla. And Nikola Tesla is a guy that I have been very interested in for many years. He died in 1943, born in 1856. He was 86 years old when he died. But Tesla had some really interesting features, and he was very dominant in the water element. And so we're going to talk about a few different things, and we're going to talk about the shape of his face. We're going to focus on two kind of key things primarily, which are the water element, the shape of his face, and maybe even a third marker, which I think is relevant, his age. I'm sorry, not his age, the age markers on the face. Because the way Nikola Tesla's his life unfolded is indicative of some face reading metrics, the things that face reading says according to classical theory, and how his life unfolded are congruent. Now, if you don't know who Nikola Tesla was, he was an inventor. I believe he was Serbian, and I say this, and I do not say it lightly, he was one of the greatest minds of all time, one of the truest geniuses in human history. His mental capacity was unparalleled, and he contributed a lot to the technological sphere. And we've all heard of the band AC/DC, alternating current and direct current. His contributions to alternating current and using that in the context of the motor was one of his contributions. He excelled across the board, but he had this capacity with his mind to do phenomenal things. He was able to memorize entire books. He picked up language very easily. And he had this ability. One of the things that they would say with his inventions is that people would come in. He was very solitary. He would work alone, and he spent a lot of his life alone, thinking and ruminating in his head. But people would come in, and they would see him staring at an empty table, and he would have a notebook, and he'd be walking around the table, looking and assessing at blank space. And when people inquired, they said, "What are you doing? You're walking around a table, or you're walking around this space." And what was happening is, when he had an invention in mind, he had a way, he could see the invention in his mind. He could see it in three-dimensional space, and he would go around and take notes on how it was built. So he would see something in his mind, he could see it and project it into three-dimensional space, to the point where he could actually go around and take notes and illustrate something, sort of like seeing an invisible sculpture. And he could go around and he would take notes on how it was built, and then he would build it based off of this. So a true genius, a true visionary. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because the water element, which relates to depth, wisdom, knowing, and the capacity for the mind, his face held these markers. So the first thing that I want to talk about when we look at Nikola Tesla was the size of his forehead. So even in his youth, and I'm going to preface this by saying too, I was only able to get about 7 pictures of him. One of them is AI generated, but because of the timeline of when he was alive, there weren't a ton of pictures of him. And some are from a distance and some with his inventions, but it's limited, and I'm not able to find a frontal picture of him for an inner persona, public persona breakdown at the end, so that won't be in this face reading. But back to the water element, this huge forehead. Okay, so the forehead relates to the mind. The more broad the forehead, the more open the mind. You can see when you look at his forehead how it wraps around. It's just this big, open, broad forehead. Now, another key water feature is the ears. So if you look at his ears, you can see the dominance of his ears. Big, big ears. And then another water marker is the chin. So he had a nice chin, did come to a point, but a dominant chin, big ears, and a very, very broad forehead. So with the water element capacity, we see this big, open, expansive mind, and essentially the water element is also about going into the depths. He ruminated. He would sit and think in solitude. This is all very watery energy in terms of the elemental breakdown. So the thing that I find interesting about Tesla is the shape of his face also. So if you look at his face, he's very top heavy, and I have no idea why a thumbs up just popped on my screen. This happens occasionally with my QuickTime recording, so don't know, but hey, thumbs up. There it is again. What the hell? Anyway, I'm going to ignore that. The point is his face, okay, very top heavy. It's like an inverted triangle to a certain degree. There is, a lot of space up like this, up the top, and then moving down to a point. One of the larger ideas in face reading theory is this idea of the age markers. Now, I'm going to put this image up of the age markers on the screen. And the thing to remember is, I don't know these numbers by memory. This is a text and an image I have to refer back to. There are things that I think you should always kind of refer back to memorize. This would be pretty difficult unless I had a mind like Tesla, which I don't. But the point is, loosely, okay, for the everyday lay person, the way you want to think about it is that the younger years reside at the top of the head and the older years reside at the bottom. Okay, so you want to think teenage years at the very top of the hairline, moving through the 20s to about here, and then from the eyebrows down to the bottom of the eyes is the 30s, the nose is the 40s, we get into the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, 80s, and 90s, move up into the jaw. So this larger working idea is, if you think of the heavenly forces of yin and yang, okay, yang is up, yang is above, yin is below, but yang, up in the sky, is gravity essentially pushing down, okay? The yin would be earth supporting that energy and pushing back up. So, classically, yang pushes down from the heavens and yin pushes up from the earth. So this working idea of that we are always under the force of gravity. Gravity is moving through our face down, right? This is the way our current moves. And because the face is a topographical map of sorts, it's a geography, it's your life terrain. The way they look at faces like this is that when you are top heavy like this, there's a lot of energy at the younger years of your life. And then if your face comes to a point like this means the energy begins to dwindle as you get into old age. So it's not technically favorable. It's something you have to watch. You have to be very mindful of how you conserve your life force energy if your face comes down to a point like this and it's very top heavy. So the reason I mention this is because, very sadly, Nikola Tesla's life was characterized by this face shape. He had a lot of notoriety and a lot of success in his youth in terms of his inventions and how he was getting, noticed in the technological sphere. And then as he got older, there were a lot of people that screwed him over. His genius was taken advantage of, for sure. Thomas Edison screwed him over, offered him money, paid for him to do inventions, didn't pay him. J.P. Morgan, and I'm not going to do a deep dive into this, but it's really sad to hear about how J.P. Morgan paid him a ton of money. Tesla had this larger vision about having wireless technology that would be free to everyone. A lot of the wireless technology we see today is a result of Tesla's inventions and his research. So we see a lot of his technology alive in the world, and he doesn't get credit. The guys like Edison got credit, but if you look back and read about Tesla, true genius, and his life was just, it got worse as he got older in terms of his mindset, his spirit, how he died. He died in the New Yorker Hotel in New York at 86 years old, by himself, broke with nothing left. And so what we see with a face like this is that as you want to think of the face, if it's a topographical map, it's like a geography of your life. You want to think where there is more mass, where there is more form, that's where more of your life force is going to be allocated in terms of your age. And so we see as he got older, that energy is dwindling. It means his later years were characterized by being very, very rough. He had no money. Like I said, he died alone. Now, if you look at some of these photos, as he gets older, in his younger days, good looking guy, but you can see the plumpness in his face. And as he gets older, things start to hollow out and they start to, the yin starts to go away and you start to really see the shape of his face. And then this picture, which is just one of the saddest pictures, I think, but I want you to look at this because not only does he have the death mask, okay, where you can see death is encroaching and his face has become very skeletal, you really truly see the shape of his head, and here it is. This is what he looked like in his old age, right before he died. And you can look at the size of his ears and the how top heavy he was. I mean, it looks like a light bulb. It looks like almost like a gray alien to a certain degree, that image that we see online. So you can see this, that his life force basically did this, and he hollowed out, and it's a very sad story that he died alone. But the thing I want you to think about is that, a person that has this shape, in their face doesn't mean that they're going to meet the same end that Tesla did. But there are things that you would need to do in terms of lifestyle, elemental support, because Tesla lived a very imbalanced life. He spent most of his life in his head formulating ideas and just spent his latter years, dwindling and dwindling and dwindling. So, I'm not going to do a deep dive into the lifestyle things that he could have done, but the way you want to think about it is when you're working with someone, if if any of you ever become a face reader, decide to, do face reading or just apply it to yourself, you have to understand this larger mechanism that if you have these things that are technically by the book, maybe not so favorable, you're going to really try to structure your life and aim in a way to mitigate those deficiencies through different elemental rhythms. If I was working with Tesla, I would have worked on definitely supporting the other side of his water element, working on prayer and spirituality and making sure that he had a good base there. And then looking at the things that would nourish the water element. So if we think fire, earth, metal, water, and wood, you want to look at the preceding element. Fire, earth, metal comes before water. Then you have water, and then you have wood. So I'd be looking at metal and wood as ways to drain energy out and to funnel and nourish energy in. And there are lifestyle rhythms that go with each of those. The point is, you want to think of this. Your face is a roadmap. And if you approach it the right way and you work with the right person, you can have someone guide you through. So I really encourage people to read about Nikola Tesla, read about his autobiography, read about his life, and look at his face. It's fascinating to see how these things link up. And I think this is why face reading is so relevant. So that's what I've got for Nikola Tesla today. If you have questions, please post them below. And if there is someone else you would like me to read, please let me know. Thanks.